Great. All right, everybody. Well, again, welcome back. I want to, before we begin, thank all of our financial sponsors who have made this possible for us to hold these workshops for free. These are all of our sponsors for the Park County Housing Coalition more broadly. The sponsors specific for this event are it's AARP Montana. And of course, I'm an employee of the HRDC, which is sponsoring or incubating my position in the event that this coalition wants to break off and become its own thing or continue to be a program of the HRDC in the future. That is something that you all can hopefully help us decide over the next couple of years. But yeah, thanks to our lovely sponsors for making this possible. So our agenda tonight is, as usual, we'll go over our goals for the session. We'll have Lucas here present on sort of this process of design folding into construction. We'll have opportunities for a Q&A session. We'll have our little 10-minute break. And then Bailey Goodwin here will give a presentation on property management and answer all of your questions about that. Lastly, we'll end with a discussion on how the Park County Housing Coalition can, hi Bob. Hey Laura. We'll wrap up with a discussion on how the coalition can support you and support the creation of accessory dwelling units moving forward. And then you'll take a little survey, which is at the bottom of the packet in front of you on the table, and we'll adjourn. You'll be free. And then we can just talk a little bit more in the future about how we can support you, depending upon what you share during the discussion and what you share in your surveys. Any questions about that? Yeah, I'm feeling rusty tonight. Those 4 days off really hit me. I feel like I don't know how to speak anymore. So our session 3 goals, just build a general understanding of how the design process influences the construction process. Learn principles and key considerations related to property management, and tell the coalition how we can support you moving forward. Pretty simple. So I'm going to hand it over to Lucas Shad, who's a member of the American Institute of Architects and the founder of LTS Architecture. I'd also like to thank Dave Karen, who's a general contractor and the founder of Karen Custom Built, for the content in the session. All right, so take it away, Lucas.
All right, so I just wanted to I'm Lucas Shad, probably our claim to fame at the office right now is we just did the pavilion and at the Shane Center, and then also the architecture record at the depot. We're doing a bathroom remodel, which would be pretty fun. Amongst lots of residential houses, and I think that's what we're talking about, is probably residential. I think the thing that was interesting to me when Catherine asked me to talk about this was I can see a lot of flaws in the process when people try to build anything. And from an owner standpoint, probably the most important thing is having sort of clarity of thought initially and carrying that through the project. And this starts with programming. And so a program for anything you're going to build is a written description of what you're going to build. And it's important to write it down. It adds clarity of thought and intention to what you're going to build. If you can't write it down, you probably shouldn't build it. And I go through this a lot with clients, and they don't even know what they want to build. They just want to build something, which is great. But you'll end up wasting a lot of time and money if you don't really narrow it down. And so that's called planning programming. And so that's the first part of the process. And this is kind of straightforward. And something I do is like maybe just go through the whole process, and then we'll dive into a little bit more into detail. And at the end of it, we can go into further detail on any section you want to do. But I'm going to kind of go pretty quickly through it because it's a lot of content. So planning programming is writing down exactly what you want in the building. we're leaning for ADUs. They're pretty straightforward, but even the smallest projects can have a lot of detail to them. We just finished up a project in the Lone Mountain Ranch, where we did this conversion of an apartment building into like this ultra complicated dining hall for like Dave Chappelle had his birthday party there. It was like 600 square feet. It cost $4.2 million. So you can absolutely throw as much money as you want at a small square footage. So, you know, do a really good job of thinking through the planning programming, writing down everything about the project, and I'll show you an example in a second. The next phase is the schematic design. And the reason you go through the schematic design process instead of just jumping right in and drawing the whole thing is you want to kind of sneak up on it a little bit. You want to sketch out the idea. And this would be probably an architect's job, but if you're the owner and you're designing your own project, sketch this out. Think through each part, look for scale, measure rooms, and then draw those accordingly. Design, development, and construction documents kind of blur together. This would be the part where you actually create an instruction book to build the building. And then construction itself is pretty straightforward. The planning and programming guide is the next page in your packet there. And this is pretty useful for residential building. When somebody comes and says, I want a house, this is what we start with. And obviously, we collect all the information, but we go through each room and send the client home with this exact guide, and they do homework. And so if they like a room in their house, plot a tape measure and measure it. Write that down, and you know, most of what you're doing is just research and finding out exactly what the client wants in their building. So write everything down. How big you want the refrigerator, how big you want the range, you know, every single part of it, of the building. How many car garage, on laundry, scissor stack unit, you know, various things. So I thought that would be useful.
I think that programming guide is really useful for asking all those questions about what you want and also determining what you don't want.
Yeah.
I saw that in some of the examples that you shared. Like some folks were like, I don't really care about garage stuff.
Right.
We're not even thinking about that.
Yeah, they don't want a pool or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And harkening back, sorry if I may,
Sure.
harkening back to the budget conversation that we had in section 1, remember how we had that very detailed budget with line items for everything? If you're looking at that programming guide and you realize that you don't need something, it could potentially, that line item could get stricken from your budget. So again, this can be another tool for thinking about what you need in budget. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I mean, I think it adds so much. We have a project right now, well, we have 2 projects right now where the owners changed their mind pretty dramatically as we went through the project. They, you know, one of them, they added a wood-fired pizza oven to the kitchen, and that affected a lot of other things. They changed the loft. They want to now screen movies in the loft, completely changed the loft idea, on and on and on. As you can imagine, changes can spiral out of control. And when that happens, invariably you spend more money. And so, especially on a small project like an ADU, you really want to be cost conscious, probably, and just kind of think everything through. But going into it with a really good idea of what you want, it's just like defining what winning looks like. Here's exactly what winning looks like, and you write it down, and then so when you go to the contractor, you know, the clear path forward looks like this. So, and there'll be getting some other examples of the planning program if you want. Let's go schematic design. Oh, sorry, and then another thing with the planning programming, when you fill out the guide, you say, you know, the bedroom needs to be this big, and I want a queen size bed, and on and on and on. A lot of times we encourage people to send all the example pictures, kind of like a mood board.
Pinterest board.
Yeah, Pinterest board, there you go. And so that we just peel those off and throw them in like OneNote and just kind of collect them. So whenever and obviously it's a, you know, bigger scope buildings, but whenever we're looking at a bracket on a countertop or something like this, I said, what is it going to look like? Well, we look at the mood board. So, okay, well, this is kind of like, these all kind of look like this because that's what the client wants it to look like.
So basically, like having those images helps you later on when you're trying to like identify exactly what you're gonna, all the fixtures and stuff.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
mean,
have to start
it's
from
like,
scratch with
it's a
that.
visual representation of clarity of thought.
Mhm.
So you've got it written down and you've got kind of what you want it to look like thematically.
Mhm.
And so then this is an example of schematic design that we kicked out for the house down Valley. And this is kind of where it starts, sketch it out. They show the site plan, all the relationships to the other buildings on the property. Everything should be drawn kind of roughly to scale. And you know, you've incorporated all of the parts of the program now in graphic form. So you've allowed everything to take shape. And then, you know, you shoot off like lines and see if they like it.
And in the event they do like it,
Yeah, that's what it looks like, yeah. That was near prey. That's fun. This is kind of another example. So the image on the left is kind of the sketch that I sent the client first. And then we hardline those drawings or put them into the computer. And that makes it easier to do cost estimates. So, you know, if you're working with a builder, you can do something like this, and maybe you draw this on graphing paper or something like that for representation purposes. And then you work with the builder and say, that, you know, give me a rough idea what this costs before we go too far down the road on this. Am I way off base or are we kind of roughly on budget? So it's a good way of kind of testing the waters and starting the conversation with your builder.
It's also the drawings you can send in, for example, to Canyon Noble to get takeoff costs. Once you get that actual architect drawings, you can submit them and they will tell you what the truss package costs, what your roof material costs, what your heating costs are,
Yeah.
what your siding, your flooring, all of it. And then they send it to you in like a PDF so that you can get an idea and then you decide, do I really need wide oak floors? Probably not. I guess I can go with LVP, those sorts of things.
that's a great segue into our next slide.
Yeah, there you go. So that we'll take that that hardline drawing and break it down into individual pieces.
Yeah.
Do takeoffs. And so, yeah, you get the lumberyard to do it. We'll do it too. Coming at it from both angles, usually you get a pretty good idea of where things are going to land cost wise, or at least quantity wise. And then apply unit cost multipliers to white oak flooring and see where that's going to come in and kind of break it all down by division. And so we still use like the 16 division format from 20 years ago because I don't want to change. But
What's that?
it's like a master spec format. So it's like you take every part of a building and you break it down into divisions. And there used to be like roughly 16 divisions. Now there's a lot more. But it's everything from like site work. So you're talking about like septic lines or the septic field. It has, you know, $11,000 for a gravity feed septic field. And then you go to a well, and the well is going to cost, you know, $6,000. And then you put a variable speed pump in the well, that's $7,800. And then you go to the next thing. So you break everything into the individual parts and pieces, and you get a total. I think, you know, do I want to pay X amount for what I'm doing? You can kind of break it down and decide. And then you draw construction documents. This is one that we drew. It's south of Big Timber, and it's on the next slide.
Oh, this next.
Yeah, just a little bit more information. Yeah, so that's just got straight views of the building. You know, looking straight down as a plan view, the electrical diagram, foundation plans, roof framing plans, elevations, showing, you know, essentially an instruction booklet visually on how to put the building together. And depending on how complicated it is, it can be, it can have a lot of detail to the structural components and how they come together as well.
And we did intentionally skip number 3, which was, I think, design development phase. And so do you want to talk about why those kind of blur together?
Yeah, design development is just sort of like, it kind of gets mixed into the construction document space when you're drawing a project from the architect standpoint. On a smaller project like this, it's not that complicated. On a big job, I mean, on a commercial job or something like that, you'll develop the design as you go through and do the construction documents. And then at the end of that design development phase, you'll also do another cost estimate to the client. So you'll be able to show them, here we are, before we go really crazy with this thing and put the instruction booklet together. You just do another double check on the price, make sure they're okay with it. Then you jump into the instruction booklet portion of the budget. And then when you start to build it, this is a standard G701 through G704 AIA format on how to break down the project in an application for payment format. And this is a way of tracking the budget as you go through the project. So you take that initial cost estimate that had the expanded view of all the parts and pieces, and then you apply them to a budget. And so you'll basically, the idea is you'll have a scheduled value, a revised value if you change as you go through the project. Everything changes all the time. I would not expect it not to change. Then work completed to date, and then work remaining. So essentially, you just kind of know where you are every time you kick out that document as a contractor. So the client knows, hey, we have this amount of work left in each of these subcategories. We kick these out every 2 weeks for every job that we do. So that it's always like constant information, constant flow. Managing expectations is a really big part of the job.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. Which part?
The managing expectations part. Are you managing like for a homeowner, for example, is it like you're providing that information so that they have
Well,
clear
it's-
expectations, or the contractors and subs, like? Yeah.
As a contractor, so we build things too. So we're design build. And so we will draw it and then build it typically. And we will, before we do any work, we will create a full cost estimate broken down into the budget analysis. And so every single thing is broken out. And sometimes they're, 15 pages long. There's lots of subcategories, and it's everything from, like site work, running utilities, concrete, framing, masonry, carpentry, finished carpentry, timber work, doors and windows, all the accessories like bathroom accessories, kitchen accessories, knobs and pulls on cabinets, cabinetry, countertops, furnishings if there are any, mechanical systems like HVAC systems, plumbing systems, electrical systems, and then a tally at the end of every single one of those parts. And so you show this to the client before you do any work. Say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. Here's all the breakdown of everything. We've talked about all the decisions that are on paper in number form. And this is the roadmap forward numerically. And then as the work is being completed, it typically starts with like site work and utilities. And, as you work through the job, the various phases, you'll say, well, we had $20,000 in the budget for site work. We spent 18. We've got $2,000 left. I'm going to take that $2,000 because we're done with site work. And I'd like to move that into our contingency pile. We may grab that later. And then you go to framing, you frame the building and you're over by $2,000 and take that $2,000 and put it back in the framing. So it's fungible in that respect. But all the time, every time you kick out an application for payment, everybody knows numerically where you are in the process. So it has a balanced finish at the end of this this worksheet. So it's not a surprise. It is super bizarre to me. And we did a project on B Street, and the owner didn't look at any of these. I sent the email every 2 weeks and said, please send us, $18,000 or whatever it was. And it's just kept giving money. And she never looked at the continuation sheet, never looked at the application sheet until like the end of the job. She's like, oh my God, I spent so much money. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, we could not have been more thorough. Like, this is insanely thorough. And no one does this. But this is absolutely gold standard. This is what everyone should do.
Great. All right, so Lucas we're going to talk a little bit about some other elements and then hold your questions for our Q&A, which is coming up in just a minute. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit of what David would have presented to you tonight. And if you have specific questions about what we're covering, I'm happy to forward those to him or connect you directly with him. So something that he wanted to emphasize and that I brought up in last class was this sort of construction work triangle that consists of 3 factors: time, cost, and quality. And basically, you can't have something completed rapidly that's low cost and high quality. You just can't have all 3 of those things at once. So when you change one of those factors, it's likely to influence other factors. So for example, when you spec out a project and then you realize you need it done a lot faster than anticipated, there are 2 potential outcomes, right? And this is the example that David gave me, which is a decrease in quality as a set number of workers try to complete the same amount of work over a shorter period, or an increase in costs as you hire more workers to complete that high quality work within a shorter period. That's pretty straightforward. One of the homeowners who participated in one of our ADU tours in September suggested that one way to keep track of this is to request daily reports from contractors. But I would invite Lucas or anybody else in the room to share their perspective on how to balance the elements of the construction triangle, whether they have found this construction triangle to be true in their work or their experiences. So I'll open it up. Does anybody want to share a little bit? Anyone who's gone through a construction process? I can have a good start at that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you want an update from your contractor, I would just go back, like, if you're gonna take one thing away from this session from my perspective, would be to be very good about planning up front and managing expectations. And so when you're looking at, from the owner standpoint, do a really good job of thinking what you want and conveying that in a very succinct, well thought through way to whomever is building your project or architect or drawing it. Make sure that you do a great job of programming. If you've done a really good job of conveying what you want and the subsequent phases follow what you want, you really need to touch base with your contractor when they deviate from what you want. For some reason that's unknown. If you couldn't do something for some sort of reason, if there was a problem or something like that, that's fine. But if you're really good about managing those expectations up front, like this is exactly what I want to do. Then the touching base with your contractor, the project updates are pretty simple. They go pretty cleanly. So yeah, I would just really focus on programming. It's really huge.
I would also say that I think that a daily cadence for reporting, you also want to do a delicate balance, not annoying your contractor, because then they're just going to get frustrated with you. I've worked in development over in Bozeman and in Calgary as well. And I think that a better cadence, if you have good programming, is probably like a weekly touch base. And then you as the owner make sure you communicate with them about if it's okay for you to do site visits to observe when they're, like, at the end of the day, when they're gone, to go in and see what they've done or what's happening. And then you can kind of make a mental note of the list of questions you have. And if there's something super pressing, like you see plumbing for a sink in the island and you didn't want a sink in the island, you can catch that before that is installed or the walls are put in or something like that. But just kind of balance that need for information with an understanding that they are also trying to accomplish what your vision is for them.
That's helpful. Anybody else have thoughts they want to share based on their construction experiences? No? Oh,
I don't think our construction experience was typical.
okay.
We built an addition onto our house and our contractor was one of our best friends. And so we actually did get the whole triangle. And he worked off of my very poor sketch and just brought in an architect to figure out the roof limit, you know. So, and now with our ADU, I think my husband and son are going to try to do it mostly themselves because they're in construction, just they're not in all of it. So they're going to have to be careful with what they pick to do and what we hire out.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that. Any other thoughts on this? Great. Oh, great. Just a quick note about Passive House design, because Dave Karen is a Passive House certified builder. This is another example of how design flows into construction. Passive House is a design and construction standard, which can significantly reduce a home's energy use. That can vary pretty greatly depending upon the kind of structure you're kind of trying to build and whether you're doing a retrofit or not and what kind of structure is getting retrofitted. But the numbers online say they can reduce a home's energy use by up to 80 or 90%. Passive house principles are often integrated into several different stages in the process, including site planning. So there's consideration of solar gain and window placement and overhangs over windows, design development stage when energy modeling, I think, typically takes place. And that's to help create an airtight building envelope. So that's your windows and doors, walls, roof and floors. That doesn't have moisture issues. And then in your construction document, so it'll specify like high performing windows, for example, or ways that the building can be constructed or retrofitted to reduce thermal bridging. It can also ensure adequate ventilation or achieve a tight building envelope. This is all executed, of course, during the construction phase, when your build team, whether that's you and your friends and your family or your contractors, execute, specific wall assemblies. Air sealing is a really important factor in passive house construction, or other unique aspects like the ventilation system, which can be an energy recovery ventilator or a heat recovery ventilator, basically like a system that exchanges indoor air with outdoor air in a manner that conserves energy. So there are folks who are trained in this type of design and construction and consultation, folks who can do the energy modeling for you, folks who can do architecture, folks who are builders, and you can search for them on the Passive House member directory. So I've included a link to that in the slides. If you're curious, there are some professionals with that training in our region. But these are also principles you can be thinking about anytime with your build through the design and construction phase. This slide shows sort of these 5 key categories that are principles of passive house design, and they include higher levels of thermal insulation, passive house windows, so they might be double or triple pane, adequate ventilation strategies. So I mentioned energy recovery or heat recovery ventilators that basically just pass the warm indoor air in your house through the cool outdoor air coming into the house. And so like in the winter, for example, the cool outdoor air is warmed by the indoor exhaust air as it's coming into your house. So it reduces the need for heating that incoming air while also bringing fresh air into your home. Air tightness. So this is where the air sealing comes in, making sure your old early 20th century home doesn't have the wind blowing through it continuously. And then thermal bridging, namely cold air sort of seeping in through parts of your structure, which I can't talk about in detail, but Lucas, if you'd like to elaborate on any of these principles, you're welcome to.
Sure, yeah, so it's really windy in Livingston. So thermal bridging is, it's when you allow a member to transfer temperature through the solid parts of the member. So, we go. Let me do this. So we've got a wall in plan view, and let's be kind of generic about it. And we've got studs like this. And so if this is the exterior condition here, that's the interior condition here. Thermal bridging is when the energy is transferred through the stud. And so you would maybe have insulation in here somehow, in between the studs. And so maybe this is siding and exterior sheathing and interior, and here's a bunch of drywall on the inside. So maybe this is through both house condition. What we've been really successful doing here, and so in Montana, you have to have an R19 or R21, and that can be achieved by a fiberglass bat. And this is a 2x6 wall assembly. What we've been doing a lot lately, because it's so windy here, we will do a double 2x4 wall assembly on a 2x8 plate. And so we'll take our 2x4s and we'll stagger the studs on the wall like this. And so now we don't have this direct transfer of energy going through the solid part of the wall. You've broken it up. And so we'll take spray foam on the exterior part like this. And then we'll take bat insulation, sometimes rock wool, and put it inside of here. So we can get on R11 bat, and you get 3.5 inches of spray foam, which is roughly R6.8, let's call it a 7. So you got about an R25 of spray foam here, plus an R11, you've got an R30, 36. So code is R21, so you get a higher amount of energy resistance, but you also stop the transfer of energy. So it comes in here and hits the bat. You don't have a solid transfer anymore. The energy now has to go through the bat and come like that, which is very hard for it to do. It slows it down. So you've increased the energy efficiency. You've only lost 1 3/4 inches on your overall wall thickness, which is negligible. Dramatically decrease the amount of noise transfer. Because this portion of the wall, when the wind hits it, this portion will vibrate, but it won't be able to transfer the vibration through because you have this part here, it's 7 1/4 inches or a 2x8 stud wall. This part being a 2x6, which is 3.5 inches, or sorry, 2x4, and this is 3.5 inches, which leaves you 1/4 of an inch of a gap in between. So that also gives you just that little bit of air gap in there, isolating the vibration. So that'll cut down on wind noise, as well as, increase thermal efficiency pretty dramatically.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. All right. Well, now we can open it up for some Q&A. Does anybody have any construction questions that they would like to share with the group? I think Lucas is well positioned to answer a lot of them. Please.
Yeah, I'm curious about, I guess, two things. One is project management, like for lower budget projects, a lot of times I think homeowners are the kind of project manager, kind of working with lots of different contractors. Versus in an ideal world, maybe you work with an architect to be a project manager. And I'm just curious kind of how you've seen that going on different projects that you've worked on.
Sometimes we act as the architect and the construction manager. So we'll do everything. Sometimes we act just as the architect. And by default, the architect is the owner's rep in a lot of ways. So they may have a contractor involved, and then the architect is representing the owner. Sometimes there's the owner, the architect, and the contractor, and the architect acts as a mediator in a lot of cases between conflicts that arise. Sometimes they're gnarly, sometimes they're very minimal. I've probably seen it every single way. Like, be more specific with your question, maybe?
I guess like in our specific example, we're looking at doing a retrofit on our house to make it more energy efficient. And so trying to decide what road we're going down in terms of like, do we just find like a siding contractor and an insulation contractor and work with all those people separately? Or do we work with like a general contractor who's subbing those things out? Or do we like need more help basically?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just about your familiarity and comfort level with the scope of work. We've done a lot of projects in town where we'll have like Rudy Greger. I don't know if anybody knows Rudy. He's sort of great. He kind of just does little projects as a general contractor, but he kind of just does a lot of the work himself. So maybe if you found that sort of role in a person, that would be pretty ideal for a small project. Because you don't want a lot of management, especially if you're, it's usually cost driven.
Yeah.
If you had all the money in the world, you would have a big team. So yeah, it's probably cost driven. So I'd probably try to find something like that. And again, I just really go back to communication upfront and managing expectations. So increased communication and managed expectations will solve every problem with construction. Really make sure that you're saying, I only want to spend this amount of money. I want to achieve these things. And let's talk about all that up front. Really have a good conversation. You cannot communicate too much up front with these things. You're really setting the groundwork for the entire project, those initial conversations.
Yeah, it's helpful.
I would say too, like if you're doing a lot of the work yourself, if you wanted to, my husband and I, we built our house almost 20 years ago in Paradise Valley, and we had plans and we just had someone frame it. We did a lot of work ourselves, but we had to hire different contractors, and we did all of that ourselves. And we didn't know a whole lot, but we learned a lot.
Yeah.
And our house is still standing, and we really still like living there. So it's, I guess, a success. But it's really, I think, what you're up for and a personal decision on what you feel capable of and how much money you want to save. And I think the advice I would really give, though, is that if you're hiring your own subcontractors, I would vet them extraordinarily and really make sure that they're well referenced and they'll just like pick someone out of the phone book and call them. Like, really bad people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd make sure that you have a very clear understanding of what they're going to do. When you're hiring an electrician, it's a lot of times we'll draw an electrical plan, but moreover, you'll say, you'll write out exactly the scope of work. So if you're going to rough wire the building in agreement with this plan, and it can be a sketch or whatever, you're going to provide all the can lights, you're gonna provide all the boxes and switches and outlets in this color, right? And then we're gonna provide light fixtures and you're gonna hang them. As an example. So now we've taken out a lot of confusion because the contractor or the electrician may come in and be like, oh, I'm gonna put black outlets in. You're like, well, I want it white, right? You've clearly defined that up front and you can go back to that. So I mean, managing that expectation up front will really save you a lot of heartache. And you can do that for every phase pretty nicely. So it's probably better to communicate really well up front as you go and go a little slower than it is to maybe not get what you want in the end and pay more money.
I think this conversation relates a little to a question that Tim had last session, which was what if somebody wanted to bring a set of construction documents from a different state and build them here? Like there, because as I have mentioned to you, Lucas, that the internet is awash in accessory dwelling unit plans from California and Oregon. Like, what would you tell somebody who shows up at your firm and is like, can you modify these so we can build them? Or is there somebody who does that?
Yeah, we've done that a lot. It's not that big a deal. If we have time, we can work that in. It's not that difficult to do most of the time. I think the big difference between a set of plans you may find on the internet versus what we would maybe draw here, the sexiest plans are from California. They're just all glass. And there's no earthquake zones and structural requirements for seismic zone D. And we're required to have a certain R value of the walls. Well, California, like you don't have to have, it's nice all the time. There's no need, you don't have to worry about those things. So, you know, there's probably some functional things like that. You want to make sure that there's at least 2x6 walls in the plans that you're purchasing on the internet. It's definitely great. You can save a lot of money if you find what you want, but just sort of like be realistic with what you're buying. Make sure that it has the right thickness on the exterior walls. That's probably the biggest thing. And I mean, there's all sorts of codes, but that might be the biggest thing with plans, especially a small plan ADU kind of thing. Just make sure it has 2x6 exterior walls.
But you could theoretically bring that to a firm or a builder and say, like, could you update this with?
Yeah, you can do that. That's not terribly difficult. We've had people come in the door and just be like, you know, I want like a pole barn and, you know, we're going to put our house in the back and I want the shop in the front, sort of thing, really basic stuff. You know, we just knock it out for just minimal time and just grab like state approved foundation details and a couple of wall sections showing how everything comes together. It can be very, very limited from an architectural standpoint, if you want to.
But yes, I think your point is well taken about different climates and different seismic requirements and other considerations, right? That might be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things that, you know, there's setbacks, there's fire resistance related to other buildings and how close you can be to those buildings and the exterior wall conditions. You know, there's lots of things, but you know, those are pretty easy to spot. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in, like, you know, before you buy it, maybe if you want to do it on that road, you're like, hey, let's go ask this architect maybe, and like, is this a good idea to put on the back of my house here before I spend the money buying it? You know, you can probably get somebody to sit down for 15 minutes and tell you if that's okay or not.
Coffee or beer helps.
So I think one recurring theme I've heard, and this is anecdotal, but within this group, I think a lot of folks are really cost conscious. Is there any tips or tricks that you'd kind of recommend to say the schematic design phase that might help promote a project to be budget friendly, cost conscious?
Sure. Yeah, like probably the biggest thing when you're laying out a floor plan, is you want to reduce circulation space. So that would be a hallway. So maybe the best use of space on a small project is to come into a room that then directly feeds into other rooms, as opposed to coming into a room that goes into a hallway that feeds into other rooms, right? So you're paying for that hallway. You don't need to pay for that hallway. We've done projects before where we just can't seem to get everything small enough, you know, because everything's cost per square foot. And we just keep going at it and just massaging it down, and invariably like circulation space just evaporates. And you have to get those rooms adjacent to the rooms without circulation. So I would keep circulation space to a minimum. You know, probably for like ADUs or smaller houses, you're gonna have more success with less wall finish. So you would have a great room concept maybe. So you know, like a kitchen, dining, living room in one large room. That's probably more efficient for money. And then off of that room, maybe you would have the laundry and bedrooms, and you know, so you have doors coming off of that room, a small space. Yeah. So that'd be like analyzing the plan for cost efficiency. Plywood comes in 4 foot by 8 foot sheets. And when you're analyzing the dimensions of a building, depending on how your foundation works, you will find that the walls are framed at a 16-inch increment. And that's easily divisible into 4 foot and 8 foot. And if you lay out the building with a 2 foot increment, you'll probably have the highest level of efficiency in overall dimension. So you have less waste of materials. That's always important. You know, you can get different sizes of sheetrock, but typically your sheetrock is going to be 4 foot by 8 foot as well. And so that translates to the height of the walls. You can get 54-inch sheets of sheetrock, and so you get a 9 foot plate. That's pretty efficient. If you on 8 foot, it'd be more efficient, but 9 foot's a little nicer, and it's not terribly inefficient. There are codes as far as the height of a stud wall without blocking. And so on a load-bearing stud wall, it's the small dimension, which is 1.5 inches times 50, which is 70 inches, 75 inches. And so you can, you know, there's some efficiency there with the height of the wall. So. Oh, that's probably about it. 2 foot floor plans. That's a big deal. And so if you did like an example, if you did like, you know, 21 foot 6 inches, it's probably more expensive than 22 foot. Right? And you didn't get it, you lost 6 inches, right? As an example.
Thanks for the tips.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super useful.
Thank you.
I've heard that before about setting up structure with that it's divisible by 4 generally produces cost savings, but I wasn't sure if that was just, you know, some old tip from the past and if it actually stood true, or it sounds like it kind of does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so where I was going with the math example there, just, yeah. So that's why the 9 foot wall height is the best, because the exterior walls do not require blocking because they have sheathing on the outside. So you don't have to worry about that. But the interior walls, this is getting in the weeds a little bit here, but bearing walls require blocking at a ratio of the small dimension of the stud or 1.5 times 50, which is 75 inches. It doesn't much matter on the structure because probably a small structure, all the exterior walls are your bearing walls. The interior walls require blocking at 1.5 times 75, which is 112.5. But a 9-foot plate is 108. So it's below that requirement. So you don't have to actually put blocking on the interior wall. So it just saves you that much more lumber. So 9-foot plates are kind of a sweet spot. 10-foot plates will require blocking. And it requires an extra strip of sheetrock in the middle of the wall. But 9-foot plates, you can go 54 inch sheet on top of each other and achieve that. So there's some efficiency with that.
Sweet. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna close out our Q&A session so that we can move us along. So we are running a little bit behind, but I'm wondering if you all want to take your break or whether we're comfortable just sort of rolling directly into our property management discussion. Okay. Anybody who would like to take a break, nod your head vigorously. All right, sweet. Well, let's all thank Lucas. And welcome Jake here. And feel free to get up and get more snacks and run some bathrooms. Like,
Here's still my child taking my notebook and replaced it with. Hello, sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey and Ryan. I own Maverick Realty here in town. I've been doing real estate for about 10 years. My mother is Michelle Becker, and she ran property management for 30 years. We no longer at Maverick do property management, but I'm very well versed in it. So Catherine mentioned that they're to kind of discuss the differences between long-term versus short-term when it comes to renting properties. So what I would say is it depends, like Lucas says, it depends on what your needs are for the rental, before renting it. If your needs are to be flexible in terms of like you're going to use it for family and friends and you only need to rent it out at certain times, I would say that Airbnb might be a good option for that, or vacation rental. Sorry, you can use whatever platform you want. If you're looking for more consistent income generation to cover the costs of the construction or to just supplement your personal income, long-term rental is good. I was looking at the stats, and in the Bozeman Yellowstone, it's a Yellowstone Parks area on this Airbnb assessment tool. There's 4,000 Airbnbs in that area currently. In Livingston specifically, the market is incredibly saturated with Airbnb. So if you're going to build an ADU for Airbnb purposes, I would make sure that you're thinking of either how you're going to attract renters, either stylistically, amenity wise, or cost wise. If you're looking, like I said, if you're looking to make money, long-term is the better way to go. There's costs and benefits to both. Some of the benefits of short-term rentals is that it's cleaned more often. There's more turnover, so you're kind of in the space more frequently. Long-term renters, you can do annual inspections or at your cadence, whatever you write out in your lease. But there's less kind of, it's someone else's space at that point. Also, but then there's also like some people with Airbnbs, we've had situations. My husband manages Airbnbs in town, and we had one in Bozeman that we personally owned. And most of the time people take really good care of it, but there's always those one-offs where you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened in here? So there's the risk with long-term or short-term, those sorts of things can happen. In terms of self-management versus a property manager,
For long-term rentals, the property management fee ranges in town between 5 to 10%. That property manager, their duties include screening tenants, which is running them through their systems for background checks, credit checks. They manage all the applications. They have standardized forms. They use their forms for the lease, the lead-based paint disclosure if your house is built before 1978, and the mold disclosure, as well as the property condition report. And then the property manager will also handle all communications with the tenants. So if you hire a property manager, as the owner, you'll get your monthly report from them and your money. And if you want more information, I'm sure they can provide that to you if you request it. But it's more of a hands-off sort of situation. With an ADU, those people will most likely be in your backyard or front yard, but most often backyard.
Yeah.
So there will be probably more interaction depending on if you set it up with a fence or how your property is divided. But it's more of a hands-off income generator. You can also hire managers for Airbnb, VRBO, vacation rentals. Those tend to be between 25 and 30%. Those managers will manage your listings on various, some people have custom sites that link to Airbnb, VRBO, Vacation Key, VR hosting, like all the different, like Casa something, there's like 10 different Airbnb or vacation rental sites that they can link to. They will also coordinate the communication with the tenants or the guests. They will do all of the communication with the guests while the guests are there. I log myself out. I don't know where the toaster is. I forgot my key. I don't know where to park. Where do I put the garbage? Those sorts of things. And they will also schedule the cleaning and any repairs. Long-term rent, property managers will also work with the repairs and that whatnot. But I find in this area, one of the harder things to find is cleaners if you're doing an Airbnb. It's dang near impossible, honestly, and it's incredibly expensive. It exists and you can do it yourself, but at that point, you are basing your personal schedule around when you have guests for Airbnb. So if you have guests and you have a same day flip, you're not leaving town when that same day flip is happening because you're there to clean it. Also, if you're self-managing an Airbnb, it's 24/7. You're on with the guests. They message at all times of the day and night. They have all kinds of questions. Sometimes you have to come fix a light bulb or something. So it's a little less plug and go than a long-term rental, I would say. As far as insurance was another question. With a long-term rental, I'm not an insurance agent, but in my experience, you can have just your basic coverage of the structure, fire, water, structure insurance, and then the tenant should be required to get renter's insurance, which covers all of their property inside their personal belongings and that sort of thing. With an Airbnb, you would have to ask your insurance agent if there's a special vacation rental. I do know that if you, for example, have taken out a loan to build your unit, that you need to sometimes consult with your lender to make sure that that's an allowable use. Because sometimes the stipulations, the terms of the loan will say that you can't do that. With vacation rentals, your property insurance covers the structure, and then most of the big ones, Airbnb, VRBO, have insurance coverage for damage that is done to the property. Someone spills white wine on a really expensive, nice couch that you have, or red wine on a couch that you have, or lights a fire, something like that. So those are the three questions that I was asked. I do want to mention that my mom wanted me to note that she's had 6 property owners in the last month convert back over to long-term rentals because they just weren't getting any bookings. There's 2 new hotels in town. Do you know how many Airbnbs are in town?
I think the downtown master plan estimated there was something like 400.
Yeah,
Yeah. In Livingston.
in Livingston.
Yeah.
Another note about Airbnbs is that Livingston currently does not have the same regulations that Bozeman has in terms of permitting and use restrictions. I'm not going to say that's not coming in the future, but for right now, you do not need to get a permit. If you're in the county, you do have to contact the sanitarian. And Scott, and you fill out this application, you give them some money, you do a well test, and then you wait for them to call you back to come through and do an inspection. It's been 3 months since we applied for ours, so it's not a quick process, but I'm sure they'll get to it eventually. But right now, that's the only requirements that there are in the Livingston area for operating an Airbnb. So, Q&A,
Yeah.
is that okay? Was that helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
And Scott came and talked to the class last time
Okay.
about permitting.
Good.
So everybody hopefully has Scott's contact information, and if you didn't make it to the last session, it's on the
He's a great guy.
slides for the last session.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a lot.
Super easy to talk to, very helpful. Yeah.
All right, yeah, what are your property management questions for Bailey?
So one of the big things I want to say about if you self-manage, there is a Montana Landlord Association. It's not a requirement that you be a member of that, however, it is strongly encouraged. One of the things that is nice about having a property manager is they have standard forms and documents that are approved by the Montana Landlord Association that have been upheld in court. So you as a property owner are welcome to write your own lease. However, you might want to have like a legal team review it before you have people sign it, just to make sure you're protected as a homeowner. And then there's lots of different forms of communications that need to go out 24-hour notice to inspect the property, pet agreements, pet rent. There's different requirements for holding rent and their deposit. You have to have separate accounts. Lots of little details that get into it in order to keep things straight and narrow. There's also in town people that have a tendency to not be approved by management companies for rentals that kind of look for self-managed properties to rent. So if you're going to manage your own property, you might run it by the management companies in town to make sure that the tenant that's applying to you is not blacklisted from them for any reason. That's another tip that I was going to mention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, and I think you kind of answered it in what you just said, but do you know, are there any property management companies that deal with short-term rentals?
There absolutely are. Key Rentals, Key Property Management.
Yeah.
Is just across the street here.
Right.
They specialize in short-term rentals. They have their own cleaning staff, construction staff. They have a concierge. I also know that Livingston MT Rentals will do some short-term rentals. I know Legacy Properties out of Bozeman does short-term rentals here. And then there's several property managers that deal solely with Airbnbs. So there'll be folks in town that'll manage 25, 30 Airbnbs. And then they just have an agreement with you with that management fee, and they do solely Airbnbs.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
And what is considered a short-term rental, like from 0 to how many days?
You can get Airbnbs on a monthly basis. So it's just,
Short-term rental is just less than a year.
like,
Although for there are sort of different ways that it's defined,
Yeah.
right? So for the state lodging facility tax, I think it's anything less than 30 days.
Right.
Right? So if you're renting something, I can't remember whether it's 30 days or less than 30 days. I'd have to look. Yeah, okay, great. But yeah, under state statute, a lodging facility tax is applied to anything that's rented.
I guess that's
30 days
another
or less.
important thing to mention.
So although that might not be reflected in our local definitions of, that type of commercial activity, that is enshrined in state law. Mhm. And if you're curious about that, you can find it on Montana Code Annotated. I'm sure you can just Google that. Mhm.
If
If you list your property through Airbnb, they pay those taxes for you. A VRBO does not. And so you have to take the amount out and pay the state quarterly.
And then if you have any bookings that are done privately, you also are required to establish with the state an account, and then you send in your payments quarterly, I believe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
I'm looking at you, but thinking.
That's a
in my head,
level of
sorry.
detail that is beyond my
So,
knowledge.
that is the only tax outside of
Obviously, you would have your income tax that you have to pay on it.
the only state tax is the bed tax.
I forget what I'm doing now. So, and I think I got confused in the discussion.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between short-term rental and Airbnb? Or were we using that?
Sorry, yeah,
term?
that's the
Like-
same thing, yeah.
Okay, I think I got confused on that.
I just prefer the Airbnb platform. I think it's the millennial. Just get it.
There's so many of them.
It's like calling tissue Kleenex.
Exactly, it's advantage,
Yeah.
advantage, yeah.
Totally. And just one other question, the 25 to 30% property manager fee will come in two-part actually.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the cleaning fee is not part of that, that's a separate, like you mentioned after that finding cleaners are expensive and hard. And is that typically part of, like, you're paying a property manager 25 to 30%? Are they then paying the cleaners or?
The tenants pay the cleaners. So on
It's a
the
separate fee?
platform,
Yeah.
Right.
And
the way that my husband and I run our business is that
the cleaning fee is what is charged.
by the cleaners,
You can
get like a typical hourly rate from them and kind of
average it out.
some
People charge, and that's one way
to make money.
money as an owner is to charge more on the cleaning fee, but I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Don't
one thing
feel
that
good
I think
about
I've
that.
seen that's an Airbnb or just the over like a decade or more, the cleaning costs and like.
Cleaning costs
And then the checkout instructions of
Clean the apartment for you.
Yeah.
Would also pay $550 for your cleaning fee.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so the 24/7 job thing.
Yeah.
So if you're not self-managing, like, so are the property managers like on 24/7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they,
My experience working from the properties is
every weekend, someone else takes the phone and is in charge of,
or someone is
is hired for that specific reason.
yeah.
So, one of the helpful things is to have a good book at the property that
Plays out
out like emergency plans, where things are, how to take the garbage out if you're not in the city limits. It's a big deal that people don't understand what a green box is and how to get there. And
remove garbage from the premises.
just typical Montana things, I guess, is one thing to think about, also communicating to people. Such as, there's bears and there's a fire season.
Mhm.
And, even though there's a fire pit on the property, you might not be able to light a fire.
Or just because there's a fireplace, you are renting a house in July, and we're not gonna light a fire inside.
Kind of guidelines sort of thing. Yeah, and then maybe you might not.
But you might, a small one.
Yeah, exactly.
For the most part, though, it can be lucrative,
But it's very seasonal
also. Is another,
another factor to take into consideration. Tourist season is very lucrative in this area.
but it is not year round. So. Yeah. Yeah,
So I've kind of got a two-pronged question.
absolutely.
So if you're doing a long-term rental, then the income that you make off of it
Mhm.
is taxable income? Correct. Okay. What if your long-term rental is at least initially to an adult child who is only covering the cost of the loan, you're not making anything off of it. So it's all in family.
Yeah, that's I would say an accountant question, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's a great question though.
I mean, it will eventually be.
I think that if you don't have a property manager,
Then
and
it's
that's
just a family situation.
right.
Your discretion.
Right. But then when you go to
You're having
other people and it's in your best interest to get a property manager.
They will issue you like a 1099 at the end of the year.
So when I did ask the question about the short-term rental,
Yeah.
I was thinking not Airbnb. I was thinking short-term rental, local rent rate.
okay.
So are there any property managers in town that do that? You know, I'm leaving for 3 months. I don't want to deal with it. I want to ask a property manager to deal with it, but not be Airbnb.
Yes. Just like a 3-month lease, once a month. Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the same places that you just said.
I think
Okay,
Key
great.
Montana is more Airbnb vacation rentals.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's
And then
good.
the Livingston
Okay.
Empty Rentals, if you wanted to do like a 3-month lease.
There's also the option, you guys, if you want
To
to
self-manage, you can have
the
property management companies in town do the
screening process for you.
so it's a find in place. So they'll
Advertise your property for you
on their websites
and on Craigslist and on Facebook or wherever they market. They will do the
the tenant screening,
through
their
there.
application system.
And then
They will let you know, they will provide the information to you as the owner, and then you can take your pick. Legally, not discriminating, but like see who best income qualifies,
and suits your property best.
and then you take over management from there.
And that's just like a set fee.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's kind of helpful.
Very.
For the long-term rentals, there are resources. There's one called Turbo Tenant that is free to the owners.
That you can list your property on,
And it'll put it out to apartments.com, Craigslist, Zillow, Trulia, those sorts of things. And then it's free to you
you, and it will,
let you do like a lease.
and do the property inspections and kind of manage it. And the way it's paid for is that the tenant pays an application fee to apply, which is not typical in Livingston, but very typical in Bozeman.
And so you can kind of manage your own
Property that way through software, which is helpful.
but rentals are definitely needed in Livingston. So
It's a good way to make,
income and rental rates, depending on how big your property is or how nice or what the features are
fairly, it's dang near what Bozeman rates are.
over here.
It's kind of sad.
So sad.
Yeah,
Yeah, so if you want to do that, you can go that route, or you can, not go that high.
for one bed, I would say you in between like,
I think 750 would be a good
deal for a 1 bedroom a month. You can get up to closer to 1,900.
Yeah, definitely.
750 is
It's a screaming deal.
It is the screaming deal.
They're non-existent, so, yeah, which is kind of crazy for Livingston.
but
Any further questions? Otherwise, this is a great segue into our little discussion exercise. But yeah, Any questions? I don't want to rush. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Bailey. Lucas and Bailey, you're welcome to stay and participate in our discussion about how the coalition can help moving forward, either through a grant or loan program, through tenant matching services, through just keeping you all together and informed, or other methods, but you're also welcome to go home and be with your families. So yeah, feel free to depart while we transition into this next.
bedtime.
Yeah.
I should probably go. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucas, as well.
Well, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, you bet, yeah.
And I've included Bailey and Lucas's emails on the final slide.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Lucas is an awesome person. Personally.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're just gonna roll into a little discussion about what the coalition should be focusing on next, regarding this particular tool in our housing action plan. Obviously, we're gonna keep working on implementing a bunch of the other tools in the housing action plan, but we want to find out from you, now that you've gone through all these courses and learned so much about accessory dwelling units and are thinking deeply about them. Thank you guys again. About, yeah, what we can do to help. So I had planned an exercise for a lot more people in the room, but let's see, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. We could probably actually do this as one group. Let's, or maybe 2 tables. Can you all just move into 2 tables closer to the front of the room? And I'll join one group, or maybe I'll just float between 2 groups. How about folks join at this table, and how about folks join at this table? Okay. And if we can have 4 at one table and 5 at the other, that would be great. And Bob, if you and Barb are online, you can just do this exercise with yourselves. And we will tune in once we're done to hear what you come up with. So we'll do basically the same structure as what we have on screen, which is an exercise called 1, 2, 4 all. It's one of my favorites for just getting people to think about and generate ideas about something and share them with other people, and maybe very rapidly come to an agreement on what to prioritize. We can also do this exercise multiple times in a row, but the idea is just sort of to spitball, share it with the other people in your group, and then share back with everyone. So how this is going to work is you all have paper in front of you. You'll have 1 minute by yourself to jot down ideas for how the coalition can help moving forward. Then you'll have 2 minutes with a partner, and I'll join and be the extra partner of a group of 5. Build on the ideas that you generated during your minute of self-reflection. Then we're just going to go ahead we're going to skip the 4 minutes, and we're just going to go to 5 minutes, and your whole group is going to share the ideas that they came up with in their paired reflection. And then we're going to come back together as a whole group and hear, what you all came up with for how we might move forward. And if really what you're generating is questions, we can address those and maybe do one more round of this thinking, because what I would love to do is take back some of the feedback that you have on this workshop and how we can help moving forward to our steering committee, which is meeting on Wednesday, and we can help structure a plan for the coming year on how we can build on this. Yes.
Does the Housing Coalition have a mission statement right now?
It's pretty general. It's just like creating opportunities for Park County residents to live and thrive here, to afford housing so they can live and thrive. So again, it's pretty broad, and mainly the thing that I was hired to do was just implement the housing action plan. So really that that's a key component. There's also another component of my job, which is fundraising a large flexible pool of funding to support the implementation of the housing action plan, including but not limited to creating a grant program for people who want to build accessory dwelling units that contribute to the supply of, say, rental housing for community members, or a loan program, providing pre-approved architectural plans, finding and screening renters, keeping homeowners who build accessory dwelling units like in contact with one another, that kind of thing. Of course, the coalition does have an interest in creating community housing, so housing that people in the community can live long-term and help contribute to our economy. So we would probably, if we created a program moving forward, have some kind of requirements similar to other accessory dwelling unit programs throughout the nation, where there might be a deed restriction placed on your property for a short period or indefinitely, or for a definite period of time, depending upon what you say. There might be rental requirements such as max household income, work requirements, like there's a rental program in Whitefish that's very successful, that provides rental assistance to people who work within Whitefish in the area around the community, for example. So there could be something like that. If you participate in ADU programming moving forward, we might ask you to pay the membership fee. And then questions like how long should those requirements last, if there are any requirements whatsoever. So I want you to be as candid as possible, and there will also, in the survey at the bottom of your packet, there'll be an opportunity for you to say like whether you would recommend this workshop to anybody. If so, should we ask people to pay money for it to support, you know, like rental assistance or something like that? Or you could be like, yeah, I don't really think so. I don't think this is a priority. So that is something that you can keep in mind too, as you're thinking about what we should do next. And don't feel a lot of pressure to generate the ultimate solution now. I just wanted to get your feedback since you're so invested in this topic and have learned so much. So you're a group of people who know a lot more about this than plenty of others. And if there's an opportunity for us to support you moving forward, I'd love to find out more about what that would look like. Does that answer your questions? Saying nods, yeah.
Just a general question then, like how we can help, like in all, just wherever we can think of, or is this just about the ADU course we just did, or what?
Oh, this is specifically about ADUs.
Just ADUs?
Yeah. This is specifically about how we can help get more accessory dwelling units built that are contributing to our supply of housing for, yes. But yeah, if you're interested in having broader discussions
No.
about how the coalition can help, come talk to me after class or email me. I love having those discussions. And we're going to be implementing some new tools in the coming year, and there'll be some fun stuff in it. So, all right, any further questions before we get started? Let me check online. Any questions, Bob and Barb? Like a no. Okay, I will keep time for us. And again, we'll do 1 minute by yourself, 2 minutes with a partner, and then we'll do 5 minutes as a full group, or 5 minutes in our tables, and then we'll share out together what we learned in our tables. All right. So. Thank you. A minute. Great, go ahead. All right, that was pretty fast, huh? Don't worry, you'll get to continue to develop these ideas in your pairs. So I'm gonna come over to this table. I'm gonna grab this chair from you. All right. Do you want to be my partner? Okay, so everybody partner up. And we have 2 minutes for you to build on those ideas.
Okay.
Well, exactly. We've got a few good ideas, so like I said.
That was my number one thing too. Yeah, like, you're done.
Now.
I guess from post workshop, because I've been workshop like this.
Yeah.
Like I said, that, you know, we've got so much information.
Well, my number one was.
And I'm already it's just kicking in. And I'm
Some sort of.
what did I start? You know, so if there was a place over
Okay, awesome.
And I think that's
We actually have that.
like if you go sense like.
But we definitely would have broken it out.
As you guys find stuff.
Kind of under below market rate. So
I had just written this down. Before you
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
and then I
Like,
Yeah, so a deed restriction is a legal document that describes what your land is tying up. And so in this case, it might be like a deed restriction against for 2 years or 5 years, or if you have an applied to your deed.
Yeah.
That is something that sounds programs required, but I would. Yeah, so basically, sorry, I don't understand. Yeah, usually it's like, oh, we're giving you a grant. Yeah. Primary saying that 5 years, that like, or if you have like loan. I would really love it to pay that on there. So that right, so those are all that.
That's good.
Yeah, they're.
Yeah.
That, this is figuring out this year.
I invited someone's project.
Because I know like, I got my loans, in exchange.
Yeah, so
You're my friend.
Because look, person.
Although I
can see it.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, but I mean, I don't. Or in our whatever.
Right.
Until you figure out.
That's, I think that's a really important consideration.
Yeah.
Because that is something that I would like to how to for example, right?
Yeah, same here, yeah.
Like trying to have policy generation.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's just classic. It's like.
Yeah.
Throwing their money away. So we've got to put this down, so right? Yes, and then it will benefit us in retirement.
Oh, yeah.
Have enough stairs in the house.
All right, well, these are great ideas. Let's share them away. Okay, everybody, time to go from your partner discussions to the full table discussion. So get ready to share your ideas. I'm gonna set the timer. We can take a little bit more time. Let's do it. All right. Okay, who wants to start?
Counterclockwise.
And start, yes, you're gonna share.
Well, you took it.
Yeah.
So,
I missed the vote, so.
just that
Really is the one.
this workshop was very helpful for me.
Okay.
So I would like to see more in the future, but not necessarily for us, for others.
Yeah, I'm
I
sort
would love
of
it.
curious.
Online
Yeah, what your
resource library.
conversation was.
Everything.
Yeah.
And then possibly CHC would add to some of
An
the
idea of a group.
stuff there if we need to look it up. This, yeah, that was more of a question.
Sorry.
So, sort of an intergenerational community. So how do we manage, like, if we're renting for kids? Or if someone else was renting
To confer.
I mean, there's gonna be some legalities that come into that, but I don't know what they are, so I don't know if that's something that could go into the resource library or if that goes.
Program it's topics to sit down. We've had a chance.
Part of a
to
future
give
workshop.
basic knowledge, but to sit down.
Because, for those of us with
Personally,
young children who
with
work
the
right on the
budget
road,
process and really get close. and kind of
right
have
on
a
by.
professional there to kind of work through.
Crazy shit. We bought
We're kind of.
right before we're stocked.
I think would be super helpful.
So I feel sorry for the
Because I
kids.
still feel.
Yeah,
like-
definitely. And that question came up in the context of us talking about, if we had a grant program or a loan program or something, if we're providing those kind of resources, we probably ask for something in exchange, such as, making sure that you're renting locally or,
And so I asked her,
Yeah.
does locally include your adult child?
Yeah. So-
Or parents or whatever.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Definitely interested to work in this area.
I haven't heard of that.
That's exactly what I said.
How-
Just again, there's a lot of contractors out there doing good jobs that I think are like.
Yeah, I mean, we don't,
Audience,
like,
okay,
what
just
you,
Getting a list of people
I
that
don't
are
know,
willing
like,
to work with
family
the
members are
homeowner.
protected
Yeah,
class,
I mean,
but
yeah.
I don't think any coalition would be interested in building anything other
It's kind of
than,
like a network and
like
build a
income
pool of
potentially.
people
There are
and,
programs certainly
market
where,
it
there are certain companies made available to households with certain incomes.
To help with the
Or,
short-term rental problem,
if a household is working with
I don't know,
certain
maybe, and
geographic
then maybe
areas,
this is
so
something with their.
Whitefish has a program called, has like a rental assistance program that provides a year of monthly rental assistance paid directly to the landlord for folks who are working within Whitefish or like a buffer around the community. So if you can provide documentation that at least one person in your household is employed like 32 hours a week. There are things that fluctuate there too. If it's like a single parent household, that hourly requirement decreases and things like that. But there are lots of workforce housing programs that direct rental assistance to folks working in a geographically geographic area. They're also targeted frequently by income too. Whitefish is pretty broad, but it's mostly.
I just haven't seen my guess.
60%.
Yeah, like literally, and I do have a better idea.
Well, that sounds fascinating to me, and then what I would be interested in as the owner.
Actually, it's Scott and Pam.
I was very open to taking in
First night.
those.
Yeah.
But,
renters
so I learned a
versus
lot
giving
from them.
assistance
I
or
say a
whatever.
lot. I learned a little bit, but,
Would I have to manage
And
my
then I had
property
to
on my
coordinate the
own, or
sewer
can I
and
still
then,
use a property
you
manager?
know, the excavator to, you know,
Really
dig into your garage
It's
to
not a
get down to the
short-term
sewer
rental,
pipe and all
though.
that. I
It's
mean,
not that-
yeah, you guys build a house.
It's basically said with a
Like,
longer
is that
term.
like, wow.
Right, and I didn't know if
And then you
Richard's
sit
getting
down.
some sort
Oh.
of assistance that goes directly
So much.
to the owner.
No, Darren, but he learned.
Then
a lot
how
too,
does
so I
that
know a lot.
work?
The one thing
And a
was
property
good is
manager is
vetting
going to
people
issue
based on
the tax thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about those
I
details.
also.
at this
Oh,
point.
okay.
But no, I do like, I think you're a program thinker, and you're trying to make sure that it works, right? That we can operationalize it. But I'd be curious to hear from other folks. Do you,
I mean, we live in a.
are you also feeling like multi-generational, like living is a priority? Do you really want a grant program or a loan program? Do you want help with property management? Like, do you want more online resource library? So yeah, what did you all discuss?
But just.
Oh, sorry, I went in the wrong direction.
Getting,
Our
I'd like to
number
get a
one,
presentation
both of
on
us
just like
was
modern buildings.
Thinking about like a
buildings,
vetted
like,
list of
best
contractors,
practices
but
and
kind of
latest
think
and
creatively
greatest in
about
terms of like
these types
insulation.
of
There's just been such
smaller
an
projects
evolution
and things like that.
when you see all these different kinds of.
Even information
stuff
on how to
comes
the
now.
contract.
Yeah.
What's in what you guys can
Yeah,
get.
these are techniques that it's.
And that's, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I see that in other accessory dwelling unit programs, in other locales. Is they'll have like a preferred provider list. Yeah, so it's not like that should be.
And I think Montana's.
And then I think a
getting
grant or loan program
But just like we.
would be
extra
really
insulated
helpful, and I think it would be super fair to get to restrictions on, like,
Yeah.
you know, for 10 years
But
after you
I
build
think
your
that's changed.
dwelling,
There's a
you
lot
have
more
to rent
builders
it.
now.
Like,
Than there were.
whatever, like 60% or, you know, 30% of
So
the
having, that's what, there's this guy.
median
that
income
comes
for
from
like
Wildwood
whatever
Construction
income bracket
out of
that
Gardner.
the
in
housing
Valley.
coalition
They
decides.
built Julie's house.
I think there's a lot of
They
really
built
cool
a ton of
examples
houses
in
like in the Gardner
Missoula.
area, the valley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're very
Got a lot
fast
of great
and.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like some
And
financial
M-O-
options
think
would be
it's
helpful.
either
I think, and then things like this, like getting over that
W-O-R-D
financial and
or
information
one R.
barrier.
I was like, when I checked around, I
I think
was
this
like, I should
is-
ask, cause if they're still doing work.
The thing that,
But they were, people were hiring.
I have on my list we talked about, but
But having someone like them.
a bunch
like
of
come in and
plans
kind of
available
like they were.
that you
they were
already
in the middle
knew
of the
met
builder, like they
local
weren't building like
code and
a
for,
mansion. They
for,
were just
you know, weather
sort
and
of
the wind
all
and
American.
all of that. Have them,
Ground.
my thought is have them available for
Getting
purchase, not very expensive. Then that money can then go to generate income for the
For me, and I know Pam and Scott.
housing coalition or to put these things on, whatever.
And then I've just seen their vehicles at like
Otherwise,
new
you,
projects
a lot of times you
around
might
town,
have to
you know, or.
pay somebody to have them go through the
Things
plan
about
that you
garage
are
in the
wanting
alley
to
or
find out.
whatever, so just
But why
letting you
not
guys both.
Have
Yeah.
a bunch of these plans available that
Okay.
somebody nice like Lucas could sort of checks ahead of time.
Okay, great.
And probably that's what
Yes. Probably volunteer.
Jason Sabrani, he built, he's.
And most they use are gonna be pretty simple, basic
He's in Livingston.
designs,
He's
I'm
doing
assuming.
parts and
That'd be
pieces.
great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Just go straight.
Awesome. So he's kind of.
Well, yeah, I found,
Yeah,
you know, being
he
a
just, he
real
came
estate
in,
agent,
framed our house and.
a lot of people conflate manufactured homes with modular homes. Modular homes are sometimes better than stick built. Controlled environment, has far less waste, better for the environment. They can be put up than
Yeah,
weeks rather than months.
Yeah, we would
It's
hire
just short
someone to do
construction
our like
season
septic
here
and water
realistically.
and everything.
Let the
and
foundations
just blow
cure
and
and,
rain
uh,
but then I learned.
so I just
some
thought it might
things
be
and
helpful
we
if
changed
there was
gears
an
and
advocate or someone who could
I had
go,
to tell him.
like in Paradise Valley, there are a lot
Someone
of
else like had a very last minute
subdivisions
after,
that
like,
have
not
restrictions.
doing our
They
vetting
lump
upfront and
manufactured
finding
homes in
things out later.
modular.
Oh.
Maybe if there was a better vision, you could even said in town here with zoning. There isn't really this clear separation of the two. So I just feel that
I think it would be helpful.
if someone could advocate a little bit more for modular
Folks
homes,
that have gone through. the
it's
process.
just increases supply.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
maybe even help
Like
change
Social
some of these
Security.
covenants. It's not that hard. They can- it's-
Yeah, one of my colleagues is
You know, you just need
moving a garage to
agreement
the apartment,
to a subdivision.
and I think she might have been on the
She was, and I meant to bring
I
you
just
that.
think that should be
Try to
helpful.
remind me to give you that paper.
Because there may be a
Because I'm
lot of
gonna
people
give
out
you
there
the
that don't
address
want to go through the entire process of getting an architect and doing all of these.
but she was,
extra
she
steps.
had a lot of.
Things could be much more simple.
So
Yeah, and actually that's a good point about this workshop because we did bring up, like, we did have some plans for manufactured housing in
I did in
the
Livingston. I
last
did
section, and I should have included sort of what the construction process looks like if you're going the manufactured or modular route, which is a lot shorter. And I don't know why I wasn't thinking Rebecca's like, come on. Okay, so that's a good,
Yeah,
that's a
it'd be
good
great
thought.
Did you feel
If
like you
we
could say
adjust this course or do it again, make sure it's
that
information
later,
gets
or
our
is it kind of
discussion.
like the one and
And
done?
just
Oh,
know
you
that
did
like
that,
in
but I-
the coalition is working with Livingston zoning update process to advocate for changes like that.
I can't remember. the
But in
numbers
terms
where
of,
we found the
like where we
around
can
that you could
support
contact them or not.
accessory dwelling unit proliferation, I'm trying to get a sense of like of the stuff that you all have shared. Up at the other table, start reviewing what you've talked about and identifying the sort of key ideas that you want to elevate to the whole group that you think are, worth discussing in greater detail and trying to move forward. So have a couple minutes to do that. So yeah, that's the question for you all. We talked about
what we
ways
have,
to
like
support
what's called
multi-generational living,
you
getting over this, as Leah said, like this finding information barrier, so having that combination of the workshop information, the library, in combination with some sort of other programs that provide, grants or loans. And I like Laura's idea of having, a
Just maybe the
less
more
expensive
specific on
pre-approved
sustainable building
ADU plan, maybe just like a couple
I don't know
designs
if I
and
mentioned
stuff
like
to sort of go back
items.
into the organization.
We
But yeah,
wanna build
anything
solar panels
floating to the
into
top,
our
things that you think
projects,
you'd really
and
like
they
to share with
was
the
like a
folks at the other
solar
table or the
panel,
steering committee.
thing in Livingston, like over COVID, and they tried to make
want
it
access to the
after COVID,
resources, resources
and
that can
do it more
best
like a
help us,
DIY.
whether it be
so
vendors or
expensive.
suppliers.
And
Oh, right.
both, I mean, also, they, like, at the first one, they introduced.
So maybe,
contractors.
oh, go ahead.
I session with contractors and hire one architect.
Oh,
And then
you
I'll
did?
share it.
I was the-
Great, we could afford a class. Long as it's
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what the garage, the one bedroom.
That would be.
If the resource list could also include any city office where there could be some contact for information. I mean, right now, I'm looking at, how close can I get to the edge of, to the alley in our backyard? And it's like, oh, we covered that. Could
Yeah.
contact, but if there was just a place where those of us with could go to.
tax benefits for access.
Yeah.
So it was
Well,
just to show.
okay, so that
Little
is
thing,
also
but
really
regular.
helpful. So it sounds like
I would.
maybe condensing some of the information that was shared in the workshop to some simpler lists. So like city of Bristol, preferred contractors, you don't have to like click through the slides
You know,
and then be like, wait, what was that?
And that list could even include.
They even put things you were talking about. Whatever. Here's another resource. But,
Yeah.
as we're looking hard, she probably has more.
Yeah,
Did you get that
definitely.
from this?
I do want to ask some more questions about like the grant program, because that is something that folks who've been working on the coalition and really interested in. But I'm hearing that would be nice, but maybe like
No phone numbers.
not the highest priority.
No, it would be.
Okay, yeah.
Like, have you checked like Montana housing?
This is great.
You know, they have that course.
Yeah.
Is that available for something? Increase.
But I think when I'm asking that, this would be a funding source that the coalition. So
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
yeah. A grant program or a loan program.
Sure.
So if one or other of those is more appealing, like if you'd rather have a loan, or a grant, like tell me now. And also tell me if there's a certain amount that would be particularly helpful. Because something I'm thinking about is like the amount of, because it's me right now and our volunteer steering committee. And so there's a certain amount of work that I can put into everything. And something that I like about either a grant or a loan program is the money goes out the door and you do whatever you want with it. Whether it's you get your architectural plans, you get your permit, you get your fixtures, you can do whatever. We don't have to do any work on the back end to like figure out exactly what you want. You will do it with the money.
And then there are stipulations.
Right, and then there will be stipulations attached. So, that is something I'm curious to hear your thoughts on.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, perfect
The bill costs, where you're getting,
Like
5% grant,
educators.
Oh.
and that would stipulate,
35 years.
and then that would go into
Around here.
Washington.
use this as a long-term rental for a specific amount of time, you know what I mean, like,
Oh, yeah.
the percentage of it, the more you prime, the longer it might hold.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm really not that organized in
Terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah,
all this
the
stuff,
more,
you know.
the more you receive, like, the longer your sort of engagement is or agreement is with us. And
I don't know. I don't know how we're gonna keep it on financially or just
Would be, how do you figure out? your
mentally
costs
and
when you're
emotionally,
doing
you know what I mean? I
this?
don't know if I want, and I'm not
If you're not
sure
Paying.
if I then, because in a
Do
way
you
that's.
figure it as if you
having
are
more
paying?
neighbors.
It might be a sticky.
Always.
Yeah, see, that's a strange,
Or-
Yeah.
interest lending.
Months.
That might be
Space.
the alternate for those of us who are
Unless I'm
doing it ourselves,
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
but are not rich.
Say a little bit more about that. Rebecca, like how
Space
does your like lighthouse sounding?
That's what I'm at.
I feel like
So
it keeps
I
people
don't
invested,
know.
they're still
And I
buying,
I just
still have to make
figure
that
out
monthly payment, and then maybe the fewer stipulations.
And this is
Fewer
what
restrictions
all
that you
about,
have to
and then
adhere
answer
to,
your
so you have more
questions,
freedom in
you know,
that.
looking into the costs and all that.
And then
Right.
once the loan is paid off,
So.
you can do whatever you want with your property.
Setting, do I wanna make it a one-car garage? and
Does seem like there
apartment
needs to be
needs
something
garage,
about
Or do I wanna build up,
the,
keep the, you know, the garage as it is
I don't know,
now?
maybe the income of who's
You know, which is
doing
kinda
it,
nice.
if this is an ADU
You know,
unit,
two-car
put behind
garage.
a
and
$2 million
there's
house and that person has
street
all the money in the
parking
world,
problems and all
but
that,
yet they're
or,
still getting
you know,
some
place for
grant.
who knows what.
It doesn't feel the same
Building on
Yeah.
top.
as somebody who, this is the only way that
You
you're gonna be
guys-
able to build that
I
project.
kind of heard you.
So it
kind of
feels
saying
like there
you're in
needs to
the-
be something
Not saying, but you're
in there about
beginning of-
that.
Maybe it's
Nothing
not like a
Yeah,
percentage
so I
of the cost, but rather like a set
How to.
amount that's not super high, so that it's like a high, if you're doing like a low cost,
Other routes.
low budget project, it would be a relatively high amount, but
Can we build above it?
kind of a drop in the bucket for what you're describing.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and that's, I guess, the other part of it, it's not just that
Small place.
income of, well, I know whether somebody can afford it or not, but
This
you know,
project.
that to
What
be
makes sense?
going towards
What's the
high end thing that's
I'm
going
like your
to,
project,
you know,
like, could do long-term rental, that'll, that's well financially.
your dollars go a whole lot further if you're funding, you know, the more basic model rather than the one, you know, that's running has the highest end finishes, et cetera. You know, so maybe there's some sort of
that time and
Right.
stipulation
what I
about
wanna- yeah,
the cost per
exactly.
square foot per build, you know, that you can't use it on this, or you can't get very much if it's $200 instead of 100. You know, I have no idea what the real numbers are, but
It's not just like a.
you get what I mean.
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment about sort of targeting like investment, like households that could really benefit from it, right? If you can build an accessory dwelling unit on your own and you don't need a a grant or a low interest loan.
Right.
But
Leave
I
those
mean,
resources for the people that need them.
yeah, and I would
for
say,
sure,
like, probably if you do it on your own, would it be worthwhile for you to go for a grant, right? And then have to have it on for a loan and have ongoing engagement with the coalition for whatever year is gonna be monitoring the occupancy of your structure. So that element to it might be like self-limiting, right?
Yeah, somebody with a ton of money, they just.
I always thought just.
Yeah.
Surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with a lot of high
Not
clients and some of them have a very few like people I have. That they will, nickel and dime me on everything, they will try to negotiate.
We're in the valley, we're not.
Okay.
A lot of times, without much,
I mean, half of them.
after all, they want you to take a living.
There's not a lot of small.
But if
I
there are
appreciate that, Laura.
situations
We
that
haven't
have
had them in
say to
there.
what we're going to use it for.
Most of them are houses, and if there's just like a single person or a couple
Other
traveling.
thing where
You know,
people can
because
rent,
the
who are getting
built very small house.
income, whatever, that you were talking about, like,
Like the valley,
all
but
Whitefish.
with-
yeah, it's like one or two people.
Then,
And I know that her experience was.
then who cares how much money the people doesn't get?
On the smaller end.
If it's going to help,
Yeah, so it's
The
just, yeah,
community
figuring out the
ultimately.
money and like
let them get involved.
how much I thought.
It's a little trickier down the road if somebody wants to sell, then can you enforce the next owner?
Right.
Yeah, we have some like hands free. I worked with her at Refuge.
Alone, it just gets.
I don't know if you ever met Meg. She has a firm.
Maybe you could have both and
Investment.
Okay.
Yeah.
go for the one that suits their situation.
I think she was loving
Yeah, or
her
maybe
stuff.
there's a grant program for households that you can
And I
qualify,
couldn't
right?
remember.
And then a loan program for everybody else. This
One
is
could have a house that they inherit, but they don't have to work it.
so exactly.
Well, and then there's the evaluations.
All right. All right, other table. Are you ready to share some of your takeaways?
We just had a few.
That's great. All right.
I thought it was your.
Go right ahead.
We had probably three ideas that kind of floated to the top. First one was kind of a repository for local contractors, where the contractors were kind of vetted ahead of time. Knew the specialty, knew that they were interested in working within Park County, and on smaller projects. Anything that I missed?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. People like willing to work on small projects. I think it's hard to find these days. And maybe some motivation from the HRDC to get more contractors to work with homeowners for those smaller projects would be awesome.
Cool. That's really great. I love that. That's something that this group identified as well.
I wonder if there's some.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. All right, so what's number 2?
We're kind of a continuation of this, these workshops. Got a panel discussion with people that have gone through the process. Would be really useful. I feel like sessions would come forward with a bunch of questions. And then the last one was kind of on a building construction technique workshop. Seems like that industry has been evolving quite rapidly. There's a lot of new techniques, sustainable techniques out there. And probably within that workshop, what's available locally, who does what.
So like all about what a wall assembly includes, like that kind of level of detail. that kind
I
of
think
stuff.
for this audience, like the DIY, like being a little more well versed. Lucas gave a great presentation. But I think getting more information, like what he did on the board, just like explaining that, I just think for this audience, people that are embarking on this are a little more like hands-on and not just like making phone calls and hiring people.
Yeah.
It's on the ground.
That thing helped. I took a
Yeah.
picture.
Okay, that's awesome. That's really great. Thank you so much.
And there were already really good ideas up there. Like I love the idea of a grant or a loan program and pre-approved architectural plans. All those are good ideas already up there, keeping us connected and stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, those are fantastic. And as I mentioned, does somebody at this group want to summarize?
You've got it all written.
Yeah. Go for it.
I'm talking a lot. Well, we also came up with, sort of continued information sharing. So continuing to build out the stuff that's on parkcountyhousing.com, including that vetted list of contractors and or information about how to vet contractors. Just like condensing some of the information that we've covered in the workshop. So just like who to call at different city offices about what, for example. Then we talked also a lot about sort of different sort of financial incentives or sort of similar types of incentives. So we talked about potentially a low interest loan program that if folks took out a loan through that program, then they would be required to meet certain program requirements, like renting to households within a certain geographic area, or that meet certain income requirements until their loan is paid off. And that could theoretically be available to everyone. We also considered having a grant program that is available for households that income qualifies, so not available to everybody, but it's just a grant. And again, they still enter an agreement with the coalition that they're, renting to, or target renting population for a set period of time based on the amount of the grant. We also talked about having like pre-approved plans for purchase and having that money come back into the coalition as another income stream and just sort of a way to streamline things on your end. So you just have plans. I'm seeing some nods over there, and that is something that you mentioned. And then sort of generally making sure that these resources are compatible with folks who want to do multi-generational living on their property, that it's not, like having your child or your parent or some other relation living in your accessory dwelling unit or on your property doesn't preclude you from getting support. Anything that I missed? Cover it? Okay, I'm just gonna go check in with Bob really quickly and see if Bob and Barb had any ideas they wanted to share. It's really late. Oh, I think they've logged off. Well, thank you so much for sharing these ideas. This is really, really helpful for me, and I'm excited to bring this to our steering committee meeting on Wednesday. That will help us formulate a path forward. One last thing that I am going to ask you to do before we go is just fill out that printed survey that is at the bottom of your packets on the table in front of you. That will help me so much in writing the grant report that's due to AARP this month. And it'll ask some follow-up questions about like, if we have these workshop resources online, do you think people would pay for them? If so, how much? Would you recommend this workshop to a friend? That kind of stuff. So please do fill out that survey and then put your finished surveys here. You don't have to put your name on it.
Is this online?
Yeah.
Like, is it easier for you to get the information online?
Oh, it definitely is. And I linked it in the email, but please make sure to do it.
I
just wanted to give you the option to get it done now if you don't think you'll get it done online.
I'll do it on the computer then tomorrow.
Okay, that would be so awesome. Thank you very, very much.
I might do both, but I'll do it in that one. In more detail.
And Catherine, can I ask, or I am asking, and I have an email somewhere here, I just haven't gotten to it yet, but I did hear that there is a state grant program right now for ADUs. Am I wrong about, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll email that to you.
Yeah.
I'll email because a friend of mine and I'm not sure what she's on, some
something in town in Livingston, but she sent it to me.
Oh,
So I'll forward it to you.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to hear about that.
Okay. Indeed, yes.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Janice.
Janet, oh, I'm sorry.
I know we like to be, we've called it out.
Yeah. That's me, Woody.
Okay, well, for anybody who wants to leave now, you're welcome to. You don't have to wait. Or you're welcome to also come up and chat. I am going to update these slides, with some of the information that Bailey and Lucas shared. And then I'll post them on clarkcountyhousing.com like I have been doing with the recording. Oh, thank you. I don't want to lose my phone. Yeah, thank you all so much and congratulations.
Yeah,
First of all,
Presenter, thank you.
I don't think you'd be able